Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, Anita Finley.
We have another author whom we really appreciate. When you're an author, for those of you who have never written a book, you have no idea the time, energy, inspiration it takes to do that. So when you meet the author of certain books, you're in awe of them. And I've been in awe of Fred Berri because he took something that was very interesting. This wasn't just casual, and this is. I want to say that it's a nonfiction, but I know that there's a lot of things in there that you take from real life. And so, Fred, I want to introduce you. Fred, you wrote the book called Cousins, Bad Blood, about power, sex, money, murder, and deception. You seem like such a sweet, nice man. How you ever came up with this kind of a book? We want to hear all about it. So, Start from the beginning.
Okay. Well, first I want to thank you for inviting me back, Anita. It's a pleasure to be here, and I always like to see you and whenever I can be with you together here. Well, fiction to me is really the truth turned upside down, turned inside out, like with a twist to it. So I sort of compare it to a Rubik's Cube. And I started this story a long, long time ago. And it was going to be titled differently. It was going to be a little different story. It was going to be about a woman district attorney out of the Bronx. And that was going to be the name of the book, Out of the Bronx. But at the same time, a movie came out with Chaz Palmero and Robert De Niro called The Bronx Tale. So I says, I can't write on the coattails of that title, so I had to change it. So changing it, I also changed the whole story completely around. Although my next novel has a woman district attorney in it and about a woman. But here I had to turn the whole story around, which I think was a good thing that this movie came out because it made me really be diligent in doing research and coming up with a different storyline. So are there some truths to it? Yes, there are. But like I said, again, it's like a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah, and one thing that, of course, hit me is your parents were immigrants. And the importance, we all have had parents and grandparents. I've had grandparents who were immigrants. Mm-hmm. And when we hear what's going on today with immigrants, people just don't realize what it's like to be an immigrant.
Right.
And, of course, in New York, and especially the Bronx Tale, everyone was an immigrant.
Exactly right. And everyone tried to flock to the areas where their culture came from and that they could be established. And that's exactly what my character did. When he came to the United States at that time, he had to be sponsored. And his father was sponsored. And later on, his parents worked really hard and they passed away. And Michael, my main character, grew up and he had to learn a new language, a new culture. And he put forth that work ethic into his own business, which then later on, having his own business, he developed a lot of friends and along the way, politicians and those that he needed to make him reach his goals that he wanted to. And as time went on, Prohibition came, so he got into bootlegging and gambling and loan sharking and started to make him one of the most powerful men in America, eventually getting he helping someone to get into the White House.
Right. And we know what that power is. People say, oh, well, you have to be natural. Of course it's power. It's power with everything.
Absolutely.
And you really made the character come out. I mean, I thought he was really real.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. As I was writing it and I was coming to an end and a conclusion, I left an opening for a sequel, but I hated to stop writing it because they were I was there every day with them. I was having conversations with them. And they really became my friends.
So Fred Berri, Berri, wrote Cousins, Bad Blood, and it's about power, sex, money, murder, and deception. I'm sure you've never murdered anyone.
No.
But of course we knew about a lot of that, and at least when we all heard about the mafia, and we had the movies, which are the mafia, and it was a different world completely, and yet we know that even when you go to Las Vegas, we know that this all can't be perfectly clean. We know this. It's just too much money, too many things happening.
Right.
But what I wanted to tell you that I thought was really important when I was first looking for books to review was that you have great development of characters. Character development is hard. You can have a great story, but if people, like you said, if you don't know that character, it's just not good enough.
That's correct. Yeah, and building that character does take a lot, because you've got to actually put yourself in that realm of being there. Like I said, being there, having him or that person, he or she, as a friend, and relating to them, having a conversation with them as you would, as you and I are having a conversation right now. And to develop that along the way, yes, it takes a lot of research and effort into doing that.
And as a financial planner, financial specialist, did you always want to write a book? I mean, was this always something that was gnawing at you?
I did. I wrote a lot of articles for trade magazines way back, and I also wrote online articles for someone like eZine. It's called magazines online. And I always wanted to write. I thought I had a flair for it, and it came out well. So I'm glad that I chose that in my retirement.
Yeah, well, in your retirement. And, I have to just compliment Fred on something else, that he is a wonderful husband. His wife has had some illness, and serious illness, and yet you have been just the perfect husband. As a matter of fact, I saw something. I know your wife doesn't have Alzheimer's, but there was a YouTube on a man taking care of his wife who had Alzheimer's, and he was taking care of her so beautifully, and people were questioning him as far as being, how can you do that? And he said, well, she would have taken care of me, and this is who I married, and for better or worse, and we know that, and in health or, and it was so beautiful. And I picture that you have been doing the same thing for your wife, helping her so much, and it makes a difference. It really shows your quality and your character.
Well, I thank you for that very much. Yes, we've been together 53 years. We'll be married 50 this May. And yes, love is very strong. It should be a real bond, and that's what I tried to portray with my characters, Michael and his wife, Regina.
Right.
And, they had a true love. It wasn't a made-up love. It wasn't a love that was made up for the prearranged marriage. But it was a real soulful love, and that's I thought that was important.
Well, because you understand that kind of
Correct.
love, see,
Yes.
so that otherwise you couldn't have written about it.
That's true. Yes.
And what do you think? What do you want people to get from this when they read your book? Is it just for fun, for diversion? What is it?
Well, I think that has a lot to do with it, but I also want them to see that there is some history in there. It speaks about some of the things in the Bronx that were going on at that time, and how the Bronx was built, the Bronx Zoo, Botanical Gardens, Edison's had a theater there. So there's some history there as well as getting to know, getting to read more. I wrote really short chapters, particularly for young people, to try to get them back into reading, because I know that for some reason, with all the technology that's out there, the attention span is very short. So writing short chapters, I think, would help bring younger people back into holding a book, reading a book, even if they got it online through Kindle or whatnot. The chapters are short and it can keep their attention span.
Yes, I remember also telling you that it was great to have a chapter, and then all of a sudden the next chapter came. Because sometimes you go on and on, 20, 30 pages. Correct. And I don't know why that should matter, but it does. It's nice to have a chapter, and it kind of stops it, even though the characters continue.
Right.
It finishes it. So that was a very clever thing to do.
Well, thank you. I think even one chapter, had one line in it.
Right. I know it's very short, but that kind of it's a little bit of a power thing when you do that.
Yes.
So I know you said when we first started talking about this that you thought you wanted to do a sequel because you didn't want to end this, but you knew you had to.
Correct, I did. And the sequel is going to be from my main character's son. My main characters were Michael and Regina, and they had a son, Michael, who eventually took over everything, and he married a woman named Elaine. Elaine became an attorney, and she went to work for the family business. And I think as time went on, you saw how powerful and strong Elaine really is as a woman, which I think that is important because I think too many times women are left in a foreshadow. And to bring that out as how strong a woman she really is, it's going to be in a sequel, and probably she's going to overshadow her husband Charlie as well.
Oh, so, it's funny. See how much we learn about authors by the way that they have their characters,
Right.
The way the characters treat people and the way that the characters are. So this is something that you sit and you do all this on a computer. You sit there and you have notes. How do you write the book?
Well, that's a great question, because when I first started, like I said, many years ago, as I was writing with a different title of the book and different storyline, and I had to change it, I was writing longhand in a spiral notebook. And as the time came for me to change it, I started to use a storyboard, if you will, as they do in the movies. And where I lived, I had 4 large glass sliders. And I would take sticky notes and I would put them on the sliders next to my computer where I was working in the office, and I would make a storyline. And it was very easy to do at that point because I took all my notes from the spiral notebook and I put them in my storyline on the storyboard on little sticky notes, because then I would be able to take the sticky notes and move it wherever I wanted to think where the story was going. Or I would say, well, this plot has got to go before this one, or this character has to come before this other character. And before I know it, I was moving the sticky notes around so much I had to start to use Scotch tape over the sticky notes to keep them on the glass sliders. And so eventually then from the sticky notes and the storyboard, I went and started putting everything on the computer. And that's basically how
I've never heard that before. That's a very interesting thing. I'm sure we have a lot of listeners who are trying to write a book and they don't quite know how to get started. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe if you don't have glass windows, you can just get a board, put it on your wall. But just take the essence of things and just start lining them up on little yellow stickies. I wish I had invented those. I mean,
me too.
And then you'll be able to put it all in perspective. That is really a good way to be able to write a book, or actually write anything.
I actually also got a new friend when I was writing. His name is Dan. And everyone who wants to write a book should have a friend, and his name should be Dan. And Dan is an acronym for dialogue, action, and narrative. So every chapter should have Dan in it. And when you're writing, keep that in mind if you want to start to write. That's
very clever. So you just, all these ideas come. Of course, you've been a businessman.
Yes.
And you've been an analyst in a sense when you're in the financial industry. And so that shows how you think. And that's very good advice. I'm taking that into consideration myself as I have a lot of things like this to do. Tell me where aren't you living up north? You're living in South Florida, but you live up in Port St. Lucie. I thought that's what you said.
And we relocated for our grandchild, who'll be 2 years old. We were from Jupiter. We relocated to Port St. Lucie. So it's a lovely area, a lot of shopping and stores. So my wife just loves it to bits, and being only 3 miles from the grandbaby makes it even a better scenario.
Sure.
And we're in 2 libraries now with this book. We're in Port St. Lucie Library, and we are in Palm Beach County Library. And I'm working on getting into the library system in Martin County.
That's excellent, Fred, and I'm sure you'll do that. As a matter of fact, we have an advertiser up in Port St. Lucie, and I'm about to go up there to visit. I have a friend that just moved to Sebastian.
Oh, yeah,
and so
nice area.
So she told me to go up there. But it's all the Minto properties, and there's a Minto at Tradition.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess you're not living in that area at Tradition, but you know where it is.
It's 3 miles from us. That's where our grandbaby lives, in Tradition.
In Tradition.
Yes.
Yeah, they certainly say it's a beautiful area, and I'm about to go up there, and it's...
And then we're going to have a March 12th on a Saturday. We're having a book signing at the Port St. Lucie Library, the Morningside branch, from 10 to 12.
And that's very nice. So you get to stand there and talk to people and tell them about your book.
Correct.
Yeah, that's really a wonderful thing. Did you ever dream that this would be part of your life when you were working in the financial industry?
Well, that's when I started to write the other story, which I had to change while I was in the financial
Bronx,
industry.
Right.
And but I always hoped that it would come to fruition, and it did.
Right. And I love this picture of you look like a mobster in the back with your hat on. Uh-huh. It's great. So you were born in the Bronx, and that's pretty much what you did. How did you meet your wife?
Actually, we were, I guess you could say, we're childhood sweethearts together, with the same group of kids, having the parties in the basements that we did and listening to the doo-wops, songs and whatnot like that. I went to school with two of her sisters and just started hanging out together, and it became what it is today.
And how long have you been married? I forget you said.
We're together 53 years. We'll be married 50 years in May.
That's really wonderful. And so, the book the cover, who did you hire to do that? It's a little...
Well, I had some ideas about the cover, and the publisher, we had to get it approved because they have to make sure that it's not being plagiarized. So the publisher had to approve it upon what I wanted to depict as what the cover would be. Okay,
and so Cousin's Bad Blood, that's because it was all part of the whole family.
Well, what winds up is that as you read the book is that two of the main characters who wind up getting married happen to be distant cousins.
Yeah, well, that's okay. Distant cousins, right? Uh-huh. We're not gonna fault that. So, how about when you would advise people? I'm sure a lot of people ask you, "I want to write a book. I know that's something I've had in my mind." What do you tell them? How can they get started?
Well, as I said, first of all, you make sure you introduce your friend Dan.
But you have to have an idea of something, right?
Well, again, it depends what genre you want to write about. Is it going to be fiction? Is it going to be, nonfiction? Is it going to be historical? What kind of events is it going to be? If you write a book that is short, 7,500 words or less, it's called short story. If you write a book with 7,500 words to 50,000 words, it's called a novelle. And then a novel is from 50,000 words to maybe 120,000 words. Many individuals think that the publishers want to see how many chapters or how many pages. Not so. It's the word count that really counts. And if you go over 100,000 words, the publishers start to really look at it to see the worthy of going over 100,000 words. They might extend it to 110, maybe 120, but anything over 120,000 words, they really almost reject immediately. And anything under 50,000 words, they don't want to look at. So I sort of try to put it in the middle. This novel has 66,000 words.
So it's not by the page count particularly.
Not at all.
Because I wouldn't know that because this page count is 300. No, it's about 300, 279.
Correct.
Something like that, pages.
Right. But then again, it's just short chapters, like I said, so the page count really doesn't matter.
Right. And a lot of people are printing their own books now. They're going to a publisher to do it. And I think that's fine. Because I know years ago, my husband, actually, and we, even with our book, Live to Be 100 Plus, we went to publications, we went to big publishing houses, and there's all this rejection.
Correct. Even one of the most famous authors had 400 rejecting letters I read. And, and then he says, well, I'm going to start writing about other things. And it is very difficult. And, you have to have a strong constitution to accept the rejection letters. And that's what happened. The same thing with me. So I went to self-publishing. And I find that writing is not difficult for me. Publishing is one step a little higher, takes a lot more effort to do, takes a lot of time, a lot more time than you think it does to get it published because it went through two terms of editing, and then you have to approve everything, and they have to approve everything, and from then to market it is a completely whole different avenue. It's like going back to having a full-time job. So if any of your listeners know, I'm looking for a literary agent.
Right. I know it's very hard. And literary agents, even if you're going to pay them, they don't jump into anything very easily.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, we're also familiar with all that. And you are right. Every once in a while, even when you think of 50 Shades of Grey, you know how it sold so many things, but it just happens. It just happens that it has to happen to get into the right hands with someone who sees something in it, right?
Exactly right. That's exactly true. And you never know. You put it out to the universe and you don't know what's going to happen with it. And in the meantime, you keep prodding along, doing whatever you can to get the book out there and increase the sales.
Right. Well, I was thinking writing a book about a dog because there's so many dog owners and lovers, right?
Right.
Yeah, a dog that talks or does something.
Well, that's a good idea because then you could
You
think
have a great
about
market there, don't you?
how the dog would answer you. What the dog is thinking.
It'd be funny.
It would be.
I think people could enjoy that.
Cute.
Well, because do you have a dog?
I had two. One was 17 years old. One was 14, and unfortunately, they had to be put to rest. But,
right.
No more after that. It's very difficult.
It's a big responsibility, but once you submit to it, you just can't. I mean, this cold weather that we're having now, there I am, 10 o'clock at night, all bundled up, taking this dog out, and it's really very special.
Yeah.
But I think what you said about people listening about, that's why I have a lot of authors on, and I always ask them that, what do you think people should be doing? They should find something that they love or that they care about, and it could be, historical, could be scientific if they're that inclined. But most people just have a wonderful life's history that they ought to put down in a book, even if it doesn't go very far. If a lot of people don't buy it, it's their contribution that they were there. They were there somewhere, right?
It's interesting that you say that. I believe that in my prologue, I write about how Michael, who came from Italy, and is sitting at the dining room table, and he would be telling stories, and so emphatically, raising his hands.
I'm going to stop you. I'm going to have you read it.
Okay.
I think we have time for you to read it. I love for authors to read something from their book.
Oh, okay.
That's a good thing.
Okay. So in the prologue, when Michael is sitting around the dining room table, telling stories, sipping espresso while sitting around the dining room table, where most Italian families spent a great deal of time, he spoke with great detail and never wasted a word, waving his hands to describe the beauty of the mountains and hills, the beauty in the people, the beauty in their culture, and their family values. And you think about it, whether it was a dining room table or you're sitting in the living room, and it doesn't matter what ethnic background you came from, we all did that growing up. We sat around, we told stories, and it didn't necessarily have to be from the monarch of the family. We had a lot of company would come over on Sunday, and we'd have Sunday dinner. Basically, we'd be at 2:00. And like I put in the book, Regina, one of the main characters, invited a whole bunch of people over for a Sunday dinner at 2:00, and the priests were coming, and family members were coming, and friends were coming. And she says, now, don't be late. Dinner's at 2:00. If you're late, don't ring the doorbell. Go home. And that's the way it was. We had to be back home at 2:00 on Sunday for the family dinner to sit around. Didn't matter where you were or what you were doing. You better get your butt home at 2:00 to sit there and dinner. But anyway, that's when the stories would come out. And long into the night, long into dessert, after the dishes were being still cleaned up. And inevitably, you would hear someone at the table say, you ought to write a book. You need to write this down. And we all heard that, no matter where we came from. And I heard that over and over and over again. I says, why not? I'll write a book.
No, that's right. And yet it's not you in the book, but it is in a sense of your knowledge of things in that era. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people do write books that are themselves. It's like it's a biography, but and some people who are brilliant, it's something readable. But I don't suggest people do that. I think it has to be more. It has to be more like you did, that you capture the essence, the time, and you just put it together. Right.
And I put in the front of all my novels, I say this story is fictional. Any names, places, or situations are a fugazi. and are purely coincidental with the exception of historical events, historical names, historical dates, or any actual locations. And the fugazi is a French word that was originated way back in the 17th century. It was to describe a false rock that the military used. And it was filled with explosives so that when a soldier or an enemy stepped on it, it would blow up and it would kill them. And that's how that name fugazi came about, that it was a fake. So basically, my story is fictional. It's a fugazi. And all of my stories will be fictional.
But we don't want it to blow up and hit you.
No,
we just
don't. We want it to blow up.
Yeah, right. We want it
and
to
be out there and get a lot of sales.
That's what we want to do, right? And so it's called Cousins Bad Blood, and it's Fred, and it's Fred Berri, Berri. And the way you can get it, of course, you can go on Amazon.com. That's the easiest way to get it. And if you go on there, write something after you buy it. It's not, books are not expensive anymore. You can buy a book for $12, $14, $16. Right. They're not expensive. But what a wonderful thing to do, that you could take a day, 2 days, and just go off into another world.
Right. That's what people who have wrote reviews on there, and there are quite a few reviews, and they're all 5 stars, and they all say how easy it is to read. I couldn't put it down. You got into the characters. The chapters are short. I love that. And, I've read it in 2 days, and it took me away from my everyday mundane life of what I had to deal with.
So, Fred, did you go? You must have gone to some writers' workshops, because you seem to know a lot.
No.
You never went to a writer's workshop?
Writer's workshop. No, never. I read a lot, growing up, and as many books as I possibly could. My mother was an avid reader. She'd probably read 5-6 books a week. So I learned that. I guess I took that away with me.
Right. Well, that's fascinating that you know so much. So do you? I guess we're going to be running out of time, but I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing your book. I hope that people will go to their library, and if it isn't there, ask the librarian to order it. Yes. It's called Cousins Bad Blood, and it's by Fred Berri, Berri. Thank you so much, Fred.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me, Anita.